Okay, so let's start. Well, first of all, very big and warm welcome to all of you. My name is Philip Krok. I'm Communications Officer at ChemSec, and my job here today will be to try to guide you through this launch event for ChemSec's new online to the PFAS guide. And with me today, I have my wonderful colleagues and the team behind the PFAS guide, Jonatan Kleimark, Lennquist, and Joséphine Källström. Before I hand it over to them, I would just like to briefly mention what's on the menu for today. So we'll start off with Jonatan giving a short introduction to ChemSec as an organization and our work. Then we'll get to the main event of the afternoon, which is the presentation of the PFAS guide. Anna will give this presentation to you. Then Joséphine will inform you briefly about other useful ChemSec resources for PFAS. After those presentations, we'll open up for some questions from you guys, and please use the Q&A function. And we'll try to answer as many as we can, and don't be shy. And also for your information, the session is recorded, and the recording and the slides will be made available afterwards. So with that said, over to you, Jonatan.
Thank you very much, Philip, for the introduction. So I will just give you a very brief introduction to ChemSec as an organization, for those of you who do not know about our work and what we do. So ChemSec is an environmental NGO. We are aiming to reduce the use of hazardous substances. We are based in Sweden, and we are funded by the Swedish government and a range of different charity funds. And you can find us on chemsec.org if you need more information. So what do we do at ChemSec? So basically, we drive the political discussion around hazardous chemicals. And what we want to bring when we talk to policymakers is positive examples from the business world, showing progressive companies that are successful and have a progressive chemicals management. And we challenge these companies within to have a progressive chemicals management. But in order to support them, we also want to be a bit more concrete. And therefore, we have developed a set of online tools which can support companies and switch to safer and more sustainable chemicals. And one of them, the new one, the PFAS guide, we will talk more about today. In addition to this, we also inform investors through our work with the ChemScore about opportunities and risk within the chemical industry. Just briefly about our business group, which is a group of companies which we discuss chemicals management with. We get insights and understand the challenges that these companies have regarding chemicals management and chemicals legislation. And we also get insight from them regarding the impact of chemicals legislation have on different brands and different sectors. But today we will talk about PFAS, and I think that many of you today have read about the Forever Pollution project that was launched today, where they have identified over 17,000 contaminated sites of PFAS within Europe, which is a staggering amount. And they also suggest that there are above 20,000 more contaminated sites within Europe. So I think we all understand the sort of importance of dealing with the issue of PFAS. And if we're looking at the legislation, there is a lot of different initiatives among or around PFAS. Chief among those are the universal PFAS restriction, which was publicly available 2 weeks ago, which is a proposal from 5 different member states within the EU to actually ban all uses of PFAS and all PFAS. And there is a set of derogation to this, but it's a very ambitious approach to actually try to reduce the use of PFAS within the EU. And this is, of course, one of the reasons why we are today launching PFAS Guide. There is a great interest for PFAS, and it's a great challenge for companies to understand if they are using PFAS and what they can do with that. And therefore, Anna will now talk a bit more about the PFAS guide.
Thank you very much, Jonatan. So we are launching a new tool today. You can find it already now by going to this address, pfas.chemsec.org, or after the webinar maybe. And we can take the next slide. So we have been talking to very many companies over the last few years about PFAS and substitution of PFAS. And over the time, it has become obvious to us that to many companies, it's quite difficult to understand if and why you have PFAS in your business. And it is a challenge to know simply where they are and why they are used. And apart from waterproof textile or non-stick cookware, it's been more on an ad hoc basis that you have come to understand that, for example, lubricants or coatings might also contain PFAS, and then you start looking into that. So we have identified this gap, that there is it's missing a comprehensive way and online resources to help you map PFAS uses in your business or PFAS hotspots. And as Jonatan say, we are now in the phase of upcoming regulations, and we have more and more requirements from customers. So more and more companies are sort of sitting with the issue that they need to understand what these PFAS restrictions and requirements mean for them and where they might have PFAS simply. So that's why we developed a guide. And the guide we have developed within the European funded research program, 0PM. And this has actually been a very brilliant context for us to develop this guide, because in this research program, very many of the world's greatest experts in PFAS science are also part. So that has been very good for us. And the idea behind the guide is to use all the available online inventories and publications and resources from these scientists and also others, and transform that into a format that is more easily accessible for companies and also for non-scientists and non-experts, so that they can start the PFAS phase-out efforts. And the important first step of that is, of course, to understand if, where, and why you have PFAS in your products and processes. And so we can take the next, yes. So the PFAS guide user that we have in mind is a mix of all the people we have talked to, of course, but it's basically anyone that has ended up with a task on their desk to look into the PFAS issue on behalf of a company. So it can be a sustainability manager, it can be a purchasing manager, or a regulatory affairs professional. It can be a consultant that has been hired to do this, but it can also be in smaller companies where it might even be the owner of a small business or similar. So the idea is that all these different kinds of levels of expertise would find something in the guide. So even if you're not a chemist or not a sustainability manager, you will still be able, hopefully, to understand the PFAS issue and to also understand, or at least start to understand, how this is relevant to your business. But we also hope that the more experienced sustainability professional will also find the guide useful. So we can take the next one. So the guide has one part, which is more guidance and information, sort of in a text format, where we have different sectors. And in the first one, investigate, you can learn about typical PFAS uses, why PFAS are used, to help you understand what kinds of products that will sort of ring a bell and you can suspect that it might be PFAS here, and you might want to look further into that. There's also a section on supply chain communication, how and what you should ask your suppliers as another way to find out if you have PFAS in your processes and products. And sort of the last resource to find this out might be that you have to go into chemical testing of your stuff. And there is a section giving a very quite broad overview of what methods are available to test PFAS in your products. Then we have a section about phase out, and this gives an introduction to substitution and alternative assessment, and also further tools that you can investigate there. We have a section about the concern with PFAS. What are the problems for human health and for the environment? also so that you can use this information and these facts if you need to communicate perhaps within your company why this is important. Then we have a short summary of the regulatory situation in the EU and the US. And finally, there is a section where we have gathered a lot of links to other publications and reports where substitution of PFAS is discussed for a specific sector. So we have, for example, textile and construction, paints, and so on, different reports that are sector related. And we can take the next one. So the PFAS guide also have a database, and this is where we have tried to summarize the available inventories and publications and reports, and we have also gotten information from individual companies that have started their PFAS mapping process. So we have tried to gather all this into a database, and we also have links in there, for example, to the SIN list and to Marketplace, but also to other external resources and reports and so forth. And even if we have worked with this for quite some time now, we totally understand that this is not a comprehensive or complete source of information. The field of understanding how and where PFAS is used is a growing field, definitely. So we would really like to encourage you that uses the database, that you can contact us if you have additional information about PFAS use or related information that we can feed into the database so that this can really grow into a usable resource to support companies in the substitution of PFAS. And there is an email address to help you do just that. So this is the guide. I hope you will go into it and you will explore it. I hope you will enjoy it, and you're also welcome to contact us if there is anything you wonder. There is also room in the end of this webinar to ask questions. And by that, I want to hand over to Joséphine, who will talk about our other work related to PFAS.
Thank you, Anna. I will now tell you about two other resources for PFAS that we offer: the SIN list and the PFAS movement. Next slide, please. So firstly, we have the SIN list. The SIN list is a globally used database of chemicals likely to be banned or restricted in the future. It's one of the most progressive chemical standards in the world. So for companies aiming to achieve safe and non-toxic chemical management, it represents a great reference point. It consists of chemicals that ChemSec has identified as SVHC, substances of very high concern, and this is based on the criteria defined within REACH. So basically, the SIN list simply looks the way REACH would look without the political roadblocks. This means that if you're following the SIN list, not only does it mean that your products are safer, it also gives you that extra benefit of always being REACH compliant both now and in the future. So on this list, you will also find PFAS substances. You won't find all of them, but 416 to be exact. These are the PFASs that are registered for use in the EU and US. So these are the PFASs that are most likely to be used in processes and products. The SIN list is completely free of charge. It has over 50,000 users from 150 different countries, and users include companies, authorities, eco-labels and certifications, and the financial investors, etc. So in summary, this is a great tool to use if you want to avoid PFAS in your products. Next slide, please. Next up, we have the PFAS movement. This is a network of companies that all support a ban on PFAS. Next, please. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah. All companies in this network agree that PFAS is a health and environmental problem. They support a ban on PFAS, and they have the ambition to stop using PFAS, have already done so, or never use PFAS. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of all companies that have joined the network. It's over 100 companies, and it's a mix of both smaller Swedish companies, larger global ones, both retailers, manufacturers, and it's in many different sectors. So we have textiles, cosmetics, kitchenware, electronics, and more. And we offer we offer some support to companies, like regular information, webinars on different topics, and communication materials and more. So another great, very helpful tool from us. That was it from me. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Let's open up for some questions. So I'll choose some of the questions in the Q&A and see if my dear colleagues can answer them. I'll start off with a question for you, Anna. What does the PFAS guide bring to the table that wasn't there before?
That's a great question. The gap that we identified was a way to more systematically understand if you have PFAS in your processes or products. So as I said, when we have discussed the companies, also bigger companies, it has been, we have tried to understand how they work with PFAS and how they have started to look into the issue and to substitute. And it's often been the case that you have heard about that there is PFAS, for example, in waterproof textile, and then you start looking into that part of your business. And then you hear from somewhere else that it might be non-stick coatings, and you look into that. But then the most recent years, it has become more and more obvious to us and to everyone that PFAS is used in so many different applications. It's literally everywhere in one way. So it's not enough to just look into waterproof textile or to check your frying pans, but you might have a problem also in other parts of your product segment. And it has not really been easy for companies to know that and to understand that. And it has been more on an ad hoc level that you hear from someone or you read somewhere that could also be a place where PFAS is used. So basically, it's just us trying to gather all this information in one place so that you can sit down and more systematically go through your products and your work and understand sort of where in our business might we have PFAS, and so that you can explore that further and try to understand sort of where your hotspots are that you need to keep track of in light of the upcoming regulatory processes and so forth.
Thank you. There are also some comments on the scope of the PFAS guide. Does it pretend to be a comprehensive kind of guide of all the PFASs? And there's also a question regarding if there are a specific product category that we as ChemSec would like more additional information on.
I think actually I can pass the whole question to Jonatan, and specifically the last one.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I can start with that one then, the specific product category. I think there are a lot of unknowns still, even if we have tried to gather as many sort of uses as possible that we have found. I still think there are a lot of gaps that we need to fill. Of course, some product categories that are more cross-sectorial, like the electronics part, for example, is very vital because they are included in many other product types. So I think that's a very important part. But I think that it would be interesting if you have information to send us information to us, and we can look at it and add it to the database. Sorry, because I think that there is no specific product category where we feel that we are comprehensive and we have all the information. So please feel free to help us out with that. And then if you can please repeat the first question, Philip, because I forgot that now.
It was regarding the scope of the PFAS guide, if it pretends to be a comprehensive guide or not.
So the ambition is to be comprehensive, but of course that's, I would say, impossible as it is right now. There is so much different uses, so many different uses, so many different functions of PFAS. So it's impossible for us at this point to be comprehensive. But of course we want to be that. And as Anna said, we would need more information. So if you have information, please submit it to us. And I think that will be hard even in the future to be comprehensive, but of course we will try to be as close as possible to that because I think it's important that we cover as many as possible and we can see the whole PFAS use, because that will show how big of a problem we have and also be very supportive for companies to understand where they can start look and where they can focus their attention.
Thank you. And on this topic of the PFAS guide being kind of a living document, There is one question about the future plans for the PFAS guide. Will there be continuously updated information on the PFAS guide, or will it be kind of further apart the updates, like, for example, another tool of ours, the SIN list?
I think it will be different from how we work with the SIN list, where we've had like more bigger updates at fewer times and change the scope. So I think we will work with this a little bit more as we get more information from companies and others, or there is another report published or something like that. We will try to feed it all into the PFAS guide, so it will sort of grow more organically, so to say. But we don't have in the pipeline a particular update in 2 years or something like that. But it will be more. We also hope that the more general information is not so limited in time that it can be used for a long time, but that we can just enter more and more information into it.
Thank you. Okay, so another great question from the Q&A goes like this. What do I do if I find PFAS in my products? Is there some kind of database where I can find chemicals with similar properties but non-toxic?
Maybe I can answer. I mean, we have within the PFAS guide, if there is alternatives, which we have. I mean, we have a site called ChemSec Marketplace where companies can advertise safer alternatives to hazardous chemicals. And we have made the connection where we have identified a possible alternative to that use of a PFAS. We have made you can find the connection. You can click the link to that alternative at the ChemSec Marketplace. So you can find. Of course, that is not comprehensive. We don't have alternatives for all of these different uses, but it's a start, and it's a way of understanding what kind of chemistry can be used. For example, if there is not a specific link to a marketplace, we have also written a text or an idea of what can be used, or maybe a link to a study or similar. So there are, for many of the different uses, we have an idea of what kind of alternatives we can have. But of course, alternatives is always difficult to know if they work precisely for your use or your function. So it's a lot of work to understand that. But we basically try to give an idea of where you can start to look for alternatives and what kind of chemistry or what kind of chemical family you can look at.
Thank you. I'll jump right into another one. So what are the main paths of exposure? Food, house dust, other? What should we prioritize to minimize exposure? Someone asked in the Q&A.
Yeah, I can try. You can fill in on our and Joséphine as well. I think, I mean, if we look at the sort of problem with PFAS is that they are persistent. They end up in all of nature, and many of them are very mobile, which means that they end up in water. So I would say that water is probably the biggest exposure route, because we have to drink water, and we all drink water, and a lot of our water sources are today contaminated with PFAS, and we still have a lot of issues regarding how we can treat that water in order to remove the PFAS. But then with that said, I think that there has been proven that a lot of the food and other uses are also ways of getting exposed to PFAS. And as you said, indoor dust, for example, is also in many cases heavily contaminated with PFAS. So it's a problem that they are persistent. They are everywhere and they don't degrade. So we will be exposed to them in many different ways. So it's very hard to say what you should do to sort of stay out of it. It might be very hard to actually do that. I think that the problem needs to be solved by making sure that we don't add more PFAS to the environment, by restricting them, by banning the use of PFAS.
Yes, I agree that the PFAS issue is one that you can only do so much yourself. You can do some conscious choices as a consumer and avoid, for example, waterproof textiles that are waterproofed with PFAS, and avoid re-impregnation or bike oils, and you can avoid PFAS products. But as Jonatan says, these are so persistent, all of them. There are high levels in the environment, and they are very varying, as we have seen on this map today. So if you are sort of unfortunate to live in a spot where the groundwater is heavily polluted with PFAS, it's difficult to avoid. So that's why we really need to get this to the highest political level and to have a ban enforced, definitely, because this is something that is tricky for consumer to handle otherwise than to try to make conscious choices, also for the sake of not only you might not get immediately exposed to the PFAS in the things you buy, they might end up somewhere else, but also for the collective to just get these amounts down. And I can just refer to what we did this summer at ChemSec. We did blood tests of the staff here, and we had very varying results. And we are not a super diverse crowd of people. Most of us are from Sweden, about the same age and so forth, but still very much varying. And we cannot really exactly say what made someone have higher levels than another. It's not obvious. Yeah, so sorry about that depressing answer.
On the same topic, there's a question I guess many of us are asking ourselves. Are there any specific use cases where PFAS are more likely to be found, or can they appear in any industry or sector?
I think it's safe to say that they can appear in any industry or sector. And I think that's something we have that you can find if you browse through the database, that there is very diverse use of PFAS, even though, I mean, one can assume that surface treatments, for example, is a very common use. I mean, that is a use that's used in many different sectors. So I would say that there is no safe space if you're looking to remove PFAS. Yeah, that's my recommendation, to assume that you in your product you have PFAS and then work from that instead of the other way around.
But I think also when we have been starting to read the big PFAS restriction dossier, and there is very interesting information about what sectors emit the most PFAS. And then we have the sectors of textile, leather and upholstery that is really like a main emitter of PFAS into the environment. And that is also a sector where there are alternatives that are available. So this is really somewhere that a lot more can be done and could be done very much quicker than what has happened now.
How do you account for more indirect applications such as electronics? I gather there is PFAS in virtually every computer and smartphone. How is that reflected per industry? Is another question.
Yes, so I mean, it's reflected in that if you have for example, if we take household appliances, for example, they are both within sort of coating, because they can have a non-stick coating and they can have electronics. And then, of course, in the database, we can find both those uses. So we have tried to diversify and make sure that whether you come from the sort of one sector or another, you can still find the different uses. But of course, in that sense, it's also hard to be comprehensive. So it's good maybe to try not to be very specific in the searches, but try to have a broad perspective and see which uses you can find that might be relevant for your product if you're a company looking for PFAS uses.
There are so many questions coming in to the Q&A. We're very happy to see that. Unfortunately, our time is starting to run out. So we will try to answer some of the questions in writing afterwards. So with that said, I would like to thank all of the presenters and just kind of encourage all of you listening and watching to go to pfas.chemsec.org and kind of just browse around the PFAS guide. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So thank you so much for participating in this launch webinar, and hope to hear from you soon.